These conversations drew them deeper into a spirit-filled relationship. Dad was Belinda's confidant and encourager regarding our relationship. And he was great and understanding of a counselor to me and was always kind in providing good advice. On Sundays, we would go have lunch with Dad after church. He loved to order a bitter melon. And then we would decide on where to go for our Sunday outing. I was the designated driver and tour guide. Dad was the designated commentator and backseat driver in the front seat. And Belinda sat in the back, and she was the one who provided the color commentary. Sometimes we would not stop at a particular destination, but instead would drive through different cities in LA County, commenting on new and old architecture. What surprised me was that in almost every city we were at, Dad had a story of development he had done or a building experience he was involved in that area. Even driving through a small city like San Clemente, Dad would relate to us a story of how he was asked by a developer to open an office out there in San Clemente so that he could do a large housing project. And Dad agreed to it, and he went out there, and he opened an office, but then he soon found out after a few projects were completed that this was taking him away from his family way too much. He had to spend way too much time away from them. So what he did was he told the developer, you know, I have to close this office, and then he just parted ways with him. And so Dad was very, he was very much of a person who expressed so much to us, and we were just so thankful to be with him on those times driving around. But I would say that the most memorable part of our outings was the conversations that we engaged in with Dad. We discussed religion, faith, politics, the history of the Chinese community, and his father, whom he loved and admired greatly. And more talk about architecture and his family life, which he loved, and life in this country, which he was very thankful for. Dad had a lot of opinions and thoughts that he slowly revealed to us during the course of our time together. In our discussions on the road, if things got to a point where he no longer wanted to continue the discussion, he would give us a little smile, and if you know how Dad is, he had that kind of a nice little smile, little kind of like a rascally smile. And he would say, "Hey, is that a new building over there?" And then we would immediately shift the discussion to talking about something safe, like architecture and planning. Now, Dad had two favorite destinations to visit. They were the Huntington Library Garden and, of course, the USC campus. Both were relaxing, beautiful, and full of memories. But what he seemed to like the most was that on Sunday, these places were full of families, young people, and children, which Dad loved to be around. It was not uncommon for Belinda and I to go order coffee while Dad sat in the patio areas. And when we returned, he would have his signature smile on, and he would be talking to a couple about their little baby, or giving advice to a young student regarding their direction in life. And wherever we were, Dad immensely enriched lives and the lives of others, or our lives and the lives of others. I once had a conversation with Dad about his architectural practice and the many buildings that he had done. And he told me that the only building that he wished he could have designed but never had a chance to was a skyscraper. Well, I wouldn't be surprised if God doesn't have Dad designing a skyscraper for him in heaven right now. Thank you.
Hey everybody, I'm Noah. I'm Belinda and Tom's son, the middle grandchild, and my sister Cora is the oldest granddaughter. She was gracious enough to allow me to represent us with this speech. I don't know if she knows exactly what I'm saying, but I'm sure that she'll relate to it exactly. Gung taught me to do hard things. He was the epitome of perseverance, and as many stories shared today will attest to, and I'm really humbled when I think back on how much I've benefited from Gung's willingness to do the hard things in life. I don't think this really fully hit me until I was applying for college. So in college applications, they always have an essay, and sometimes it's open-ended, sometimes it's prompted, but always, or so I was told, the best essays detailed how you, the applicant, overcame some kind of hardship or tragedy that showed your character and determination. I realized in that moment that I didn't have any significant hardship or tragedy to write about. The struggle to find a struggle in which to write about was probably the biggest struggle I had had at that point in my life. And as you can imagine, a lot of this was because of what my parents had provided for me, but also to a large extent what Gung had provided for me. He was always doing everything he could to make life easier for his grandchildren. And I know that makes us sound spoiled, but that word choice is intentional. He did the hard things first so that we could experience them easily. For instance, all the grandkids would go over to his office on New Year's Eve when we were younger and sleep over before the Rose Parade the next morning. We slept on the couches and in sleeping bags on the plush carpet. But it wasn't until years later that I found out that Gung would actually himself sleep on the floor of the drafting room so he could keep us safe and we could sleep more comfortably in his own office. Not only that, but then he would wake up the next morning at the crack of dawn and host the Rose Parade party at his office. While some of us grandkids, with much better sleep the night before, couldn't even stay awake for the parade ourselves. He did the hard things first, so we could experience them easily. And speaking of college, have you heard of how Gung got into USC? He goes to the admissions office and is turned away because they don't have room in the freshman class with all the GIs coming back from war. Instead of feeling sorry for himself, he decides to take a walk around campus and finds a flyer for a summer school class in architecture. He signs up. The fall rolls around, Gung has completed the summer school class, and he goes back to the admissions office and asks if he can apply again. To his surprise, they tell him that he's already registered as a part of the freshman class. That summer school class had somehow gotten him into the system as a full-time student. It was Gung's determination and desire that got him into USC despite factors that seemed out of his control. And that determination led several of his children, including my mom, to also attend USC. And of course, when it came time for me to apply to college, I was able to put on that application that I came from a proud family of Trojans, led, of course, by my grandfather. Again, as you can see, he did the hard things first, so we could experience them easily. I don't think I ever properly appreciated how much this amazing man did for us, and how much he paved the way for us to live the life that we are living today. He accomplished a truly astounding amount in his life, and definitely never took the easy way out. My hope is that I can live in a way that honors his legacy and shows that I don't take for granted a single second of this blessed life I have on this earth. He set an example that is perfectly impossible to live up to and will inspire me for the rest of my life to never shy away from doing hard things.
My name is Darren Ho, and I'm the 5th grandchild of Charles and Susan Wong. I had the privilege of sharing the last 9 years almost daily with my grandfather, learning, working, and enjoying life. My grandfather was a man of many principles, values, and truths. He had a bag of stories that he drew upon to explain the many wisdoms he had collected in his 90 years. The more time I spent with him, the more endearing I found the values he lived by. One motivation that I found certain is that he lived in hope of honoring his father. His father had given him opportunities in life that he was ever grateful for. Growing up, I heard the legend of my grandfather's success, the rags to riches American dream. It was a story retold of perseverance, diligence, and ambition. What I knew of my grandfather was mainly what I had pieced together from the stories. It wasn't until I started working with him that I understood the story. The legend became reality, my mentor became a partner, and my grandfather became my friend. We were 60 years apart, but equal. He was funny, encouraging, caring, loving, and made life fun. My grandfather was aware of his declining physical and mental state. Relative to his age, he was doing really well, still going into work, still with a healthy appetite and desire to be active. However, he would mention to me his awareness of his legs getting weaker, his memory fading, and his struggle with trying to maintain a healthy diet. He had told me once that he could not find any joy in eating a salad. When others asked how he was doing, many times he would tell them as a caution, "Don't get old." As he got older, he voluntarily gave up golf, driving, and traveling, as he found them to be too risky for his physical capacity. We did extensive planning to organize his affairs in the event of his passing. He did not get emotional or shy away from the reality that his life had an ending. He knew that according to his version of the cycle of life, that every stage of human life comes with responsibilities and opportunities. The last stage of his life, his purpose was to use his resources to help friends, family, and community with the hope that it would bring meaning and purpose into lives. I deeply admired his maturity to embrace God's plan and the reality of the stages of life. While in the hospital with family emotionally broken around him, he was calm, peaceful, and he said that he was ready for his time. To me, my grandfather was a real-life superhero. He seized opportunities with the power of his optimism and seemingly accomplished anything and everything. He had so much courage and would find solution to all of life's problems, even if the solution was simply to believe. He would often say, "Where there is a will, there is a way." His passing is not tragic, but it is grace. There was a purpose in his life, and there is a purpose in his passing. He has given us all an opportunity to celebrate a life who served God and made the most of the blessings he had been entrusted. Thank you, God, for giving me such joy and inspiration through my grandfather, boss, and best friend, Charles Wong. Peace does comfort as I ponder a reunion in the yonder with my dearest ones waiting for me there. Gung Gung, I'm looking forward to seeing you again.
Before I start my speech, I would like to piggyback on the talking about Gung Gung playing games with us, because we play games with him every Wednesday night. And actually, we've been playing mahjong. And the Wednesday before Christmas, that night, Gung Gung in 2 games picked the winning tile to win. So I do think he felt like he went out a winner. So, hello, I'm Vicki, and as you may have figured out, we went in age order of his children, and I was Charles' firstborn. He was a man of humble beginnings that God blessed richly with all of you, family, friends, and community. Dad was a huge influence in my life. Besides my dear husband Ken, Dad was my go-to guy whenever I faced adversity. It was easy for me to talk to him about things because we were very much alike. I feel that I've lost one of my best friends, someone who understood me, who gave me good advice, and made me feel loved and secure. Dad blessed us with his architectural skills by designing our dental office and remodeling 2 homes for our family. We enjoyed working with Dad on these projects. His designs were timeless, and we are still amazed at how beautiful and functional the designs have been. As a child, my recollection of life was that Mom took great care of us, and Dad provided financial stability, and he was the fun guy. He was the one to introduce us to movies, entertainment, and vacations. He loved especially James Bond movies and Chinese acrobatic shows. About 19 years ago, we started the Wong family vacations. That involved us visiting cities, going on cruises, or even staying at resorts together. On our vacation, we would always get together in the evening with Dad for sharing and playing games. After our vacation, he would ask us to write reflections on our trip, collect pictures, and he would compose a memory booklet for each of our trips for each and every one of us. Almost every month, the Wong family got together to celebrate birthdays and holidays, or if it was a holiday, Dad made a bulletin board illustrating the holiday and had sharing about the holiday. Because of the time we spent together as a family, we became closer to each other, especially his grandchildren. We will miss Dad sharing on this Chinese New Year's this coming weekend. Because Dad's office was on Robertson Boulevard, I went to high school at Hamilton High. He would drop me off at school in the morning, and I would walk to his office after school, and I was his secretary for 4 years. After that time, I did not go to the office regularly until after getting married and having the 4 boys. By then, he had moved to Pasadena. We instituted the Monday meetings at his office for family members to become familiar with his business. First, it was Daryl and I who came. Then later, Mom came after she retired from Belmont. And then Belinda came after she retired from teaching. In the meantime, 9 years ago, after Mom's passing, as you know, Darren, our youngest son, started working for Dad. So our meetings became social since Darren was helping Dad to run the business. And we actually have been meeting these past few Mondays to plan this celebration of life. Many of you have been guests at my dad's New Year's Rose Parade party on January 1st. This was Dad's dream when he bought the Colorado property. He found such joy in welcoming you all. I do think it was odd this year when I asked my dad who he invited to the parade, and he didn't have an answer for me. I wonder if he had a feeling that things were not quite right. After his passing, we were hesitant to gather at his office for the Rose Parade, but we did in his memory. We know that that's what he wanted us to do, and we also celebrated our niece's Cora's engagement to Todd there. As the grandkids were in Dad's private office on New Year's Day, they saw 2 racks of files that had our names on it. In Dad's private office. When opening the files, they found that Dad had kept the cards that they had given him, that we had given him, copies of letters that he wrote us, and other significant papers. These racks were on the counter behind his desk, where he had all our pictures too. This really illustrates how much we meant to Dad. We also found in the cabinets above this spiral notebooks for every year of his life. He recorded all the significant happenings and contacts from day to day. Dad was intentional and deliberate in all that he did. He did not waste a moment or opportunity, and he recorded it all. This is one of the many life lessons that I have learned from Dad. When our Brandon, Dad's first grandson, was born, my grandfather, Hsieh, came to Santa Maria to see him because Brandon was his first great-grandson. Unfortunately, Brandon was the only great-grandchild that my Hsieh would see. However, my dad was blessed to have known 6 of his great-grandkids, ranging from age 11 all the way down to 1. He was always so loving to them. He was always buying them toys, and some of them have become their favorite toys. The last toy was a Beanie Bear dressed as a golfer. It does not matter what age you are, Dad was able to connect. My dad was present at all 4 of our sons' weddings. When Darren married Tiffany in 2018, Dad stayed around at the hotel because he did not want to miss anything. He even took a picture with all the groomsmen. He was one of the guys. He was young at heart. He loved people. Our friends became his friends. Our in-laws became his close family too. We still cannot believe that Dad went to be with the Lord on Christmas night with all of us there. But what a send-off. This past Christmas will always stand out in our hearts. A movie came out this holiday titled Last Christmas. It was advertised as a romantic comedy with a twist. With a title like that, I should have known. I saw it shortly after Dad died. After seeing the movie, I was left speechless because it was basically about a young woman who needed a new heart. She received one from a young man that died when he was hit by a truck while riding his bike. Symbolically, I feel that Dad gave all of us here his heart through his sharing and caring, and it should be in our hearts to do the same. The Bible says, "By this all will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." John 13:35. We miss you so much, Dad. We praise God for all He did through you. We pray that we learn from your legacy and future generations will too. I love you, Daddy. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ken Ho, and I'm Vicki's husband. I'm very proud to be Charles Wong's son-in-law, and very privileged to have called him Dad. Dad was a great man and lived an extraordinary life. And in my 45 years of knowing him, I can say that Dad was one of the most influential men in my life. It's been said that more is caught than taught. That certainly was the case with him. As we spent time with Dad, we learned a lot about life and life lessons. Today, I'd like to share just 3 of these lessons with you. Lesson 1, stand up for important causes. As a first-generation Chinese American, I was taught to keep my head down, study hard, don't speak out or cause trouble. Dad was not this way. Certainly, he wasn't a rabble-rouser or militant, but Dad stood up against injustice. He voiced strong opinions about equality, and he stood up for minorities, especially in helping his own people. Dad was involved in the Wong Family Association in Chinatown. He founded the Asian American Architects and Engineers Association with several other professionals. Those of you who have read his book know that in those days, minorities had a difficult time getting the contracts for government projects that were put out for bid. This group gave a voice to Asian American architects and engineers. Dad was involved in the Chinese American Museum. He designed the Chinatown Police Substation and the Bruce Lee Memorial, and did much more. He did these things to help the Chinese community and to encourage Chinese Americans to value their culture and their heritage. Lesson 2, always have a positive attitude. Dad was the most positive, optimistic person I knew. Why was he this way? There are 2 main reasons. First, Dad had a positive attitude in life because he had a deep trust in God. Even in his early childhood in China, he knew God's hand had protected him and saved him from drowning in the river. Throughout his life, Dad gave credit to God for watching over him. When you read in his book the many stories of things that happened that changed Dad's life, you'll see why he gave God the glory for his success. The second reason is Dad was always positive because he was proactive. He was a visionary. He was a problem solver. He didn't just sit back and hope that things would work out. He took the necessary steps to do all he could to make things happen. You see, as an architect, Dad had to have a vision to see the big picture of how the structure would be when it was completed, and to draw up the plan to build it. This was the same in life. Dad had a vision for his life, and he had a vision for the family. As Vicki said, he was intentional and deliberate. He thought about the situation and had a plan to make it work. If, or sometimes when things did not work out, Dad would learn the lesson from the situation so that he wouldn't make the same mistake again. In short, Dad worked hard and worked smart to do what he could do, and he had the trust that God would bless his efforts. Lesson 3, pass on the wisdom. No, not pass on wisdom, but pass on the wisdom. Over the years, Dad mentored many young men, including myself. Through Christian Businessmen's Committee, Dad helped young businessmen in their careers. He had a Bible study in his home where he mentored young men in spiritual matters. He always gave me great advice and guidance. Dad always made time to speak with the grandchildren about what he had learned. During family vacations, he encouraged us to share about something we've learned that could help the next generation. After Father's Day dinner, he would many times ask the fathers to share wisdom to the next generation. At Chinese New Year, he would often talk about Chinese customs and why we did certain things. He wanted to pass on the wisdom that he and we have acquired over years of experience so that the younger generation can be successful in life. speaking for the entire family, we know and believe that Dad is with the Lord in heaven by God's grace and through faith in Jesus. However, we are all experiencing a profound sense of loss because this was a man who had a very strong presence in our lives. He was very involved in the lives of our families, our children, and our grandchildren. But as we put into practice what we've learned from Dad, we know, in a sense, he'll still be with us. This would be Dad's legacy, to help us all to live a faithful, joyful, peaceful, successful, and blessed life. Thank you.
Next, we have a video tribute for my grandfather, which was made by Randall Hsieh.
It is not death to die, to leave this weary world, and join the saints who dwell on high, who found their home with God. It is not death to close the eyes long dimmed by tears, and wake in joy before your throne, delivered from my fears. Oh Jesus, conquering the grave, your precious blood has power to save those who trust in you. Will in your mercy find, and it is not death to die. It is not death to fling aside this earthly dust, and rise with strong and noble wing to live among the just. It is not death to hear the key unlock the door that sets us free from mortal years, to praise you evermore. Oh Jesus, conquering the grave, your precious blood has power to save those who trust in you. Will in your mercy find, and it is not death to death.
I often remind of making life such a thing so simple and so easy for the younger generation coming through, so that they would have a much easier life